My aunt tricked me into handing over custody of my autistic sister, then let her husband do whatever he wanted. I had to go undercover just to expose them. And now, she's calling me from jail, begging me to fix her life. My little sister was just 8 when I started teasing her for what I thought were weird habits. I didn't understand autism back then. I just thought she had some quirky traits. If she avoided eye contact, I'd dramatically point and joke, "What, are you scared we're all secretly Medusa?" I thought I was being funny. I wasn't. One day at the mall, she had a complete meltdown over a tiny rock in her shoe, screaming, panicking, shutting down. That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't just a quirk. I was 18, and our parents were the kind of natural living extremists who thought every illness could be cured with vinegar or crystals. When I once had the flu, they poured cayenne pepper into my belly button. And when that didn't work, my dad tried to literally beat the sickness out of me. So, yeah, I knew going to them about Mia's condition would put her in real danger. I got help from a school counselor. She was the first adult who actually listened. When Mia got diagnosed, I was relieved. Finally, I had a roadmap to support her. I worked overtime, nearly 40 extra hours one week, just to get her top-grade noise-canceling headphones. I used to sneak her into the bathroom and help her learn self-regulation techniques in secret. But I should have known it wasn't a long-term solution. Once I told Mia we'd watch Cinderella, her all-time favorite movie. She got so excited, she started flapping her hands and squealing with joy. Our parents stared, eyebrows tight, obviously annoyed. So thinking fast, I mirrored her movements and made it look like some silly inside joke. But inside, I knew she needed more than just my protection. She needed structure, therapy, support, real help. So I started working even more, paying for private therapy sessions. It meant leaving her alone with our parents longer than I liked, but I convinced myself she'd be okay. She wasn't. One afternoon, while I was at work dealing with a difficult customer, my phone rang. It was Mia. She never called me during shifts unless it was serious. When I answered, all I heard was uncontrollable crying and yelling in the background. She hung up before I could get details. I made it home in 20 minutes flat. As I ran through the house, I heard something, banging from the closet under the stairs. I opened it slowly, and Mia jumped into my arms. I didn't say a word, just put my finger to her lips and nodded. She understood. She'd told our parents about her autism. My father had slapped her. My mother screamed that she was poisoning me. That's when they shoved her into that closet, waiting for me to decide what to do with her. My hands were shaking, but I stayed calm for her. I promised she'd always be safe with me, that no one would ever hurt her again. But where could we go? I called every number I could think of. Eventually, I reached out to our Aunt Leah. She always seemed a bit eccentric, and I thought that might mean she'd understand. She listened. She said Mia could stay, but that I couldn't. No men in the house, she insisted. I didn't argue. I just needed Mia to be safe. The last thing I saw was her running toward Leah's daughter, smiling. For a moment, I felt peace. Until the next morning, when Mia called me from school, completely hysterical. Her voice barely made sense through the tears. "Jack, I don't feel safe." That's all I needed to hear. I grabbed my keys, thanked my buddy Darren for the couch, and ran straight to my old beat-up Honda, the car I bought after 3 exhausting summers working double shifts. And I was ready to burn the gas, the day, everything, just to get her back. I'd spent an entire summer mowing lawns to save that money, and now I was flying down the road with one thought pounding in my head. What happened in just 24 hours? Aunt Leah had seemed so kind, so welcoming. She even made Mia's favorite dinner the night I dropped her off. But now, everything felt wrong. At the school office, Mia was curled into a plastic chair, rocking slowly back and forth. Her purple glasses had slipped down her nose, and her braids, ones I had done the day before, were already unraveling. The secretary gave me a wary glance as I scribbled my name on the sign-out sheet. The second Mia saw me, she launched herself into my arms like she was drowning, and I was the only lifeline. "Let's go," I whispered. She nodded into my shirt, her hands gripping the fabric so tightly I could feel her trembling through it. In the car, she wouldn't talk. She just stared out the window, tapping her fingers in that rhythm she always used when she was overstimulated. Every time I mentioned Aunt Leah, she'd start shaking again. That's when I knew something bad had happened. We ended up at a McDonald's. I figured she needed food and a quiet place to breathe. The playground area was empty. It was still a school day. I got her a Happy Meal and found a quiet booth in the back. But she just pushed the nuggets around on her tray, not eating, not speaking. Mia, I said gently, please tell me what happened. I can't help if I don't know. She stared at her food for what felt like forever. Then finally, in a whisper so small I almost didn't catch it, she said, Uncle Rob likes to practice boxing. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, practice boxing? Mia lifted her small arms into a defensive stance. He said I had to train my reflexes, she said. At first, he just tapped my arms like a game. She paused, tracing a slow spiral on the table with one finger. Then last night, he hit me. In the stomach. He said I wasn't blocking right. My hands curled into fists under the table. I wanted to storm back and tear into Rob right then. But I looked at Mia. Small, scared, trying so hard to stay composed, and I knew I had to be smarter than that. Did you tell Aunt Leah? I asked. Mia nodded, one tear slipping down her cheek. She said I was making it up, she whispered. Said I was being manipulative. That word coming from her mouth broke something in me. We couldn't go back, but I couldn't risk calling the police either. Not yet. If they found out I'd taken Mia from our parents without permission, they might send her back. Or worse, toss her into the system. And I'd heard what happened to kids like Mia in foster care. Kids who needed predictability, routine, quiet, not chaos. That night, we stayed in a rundown motel just off the highway, the kind with buzzing neon signs and mismatched sheets. I used nearly my entire paycheck to cover 3 nights. Mia had nightmares and woke up crying twice. I held her hand both times until she drifted back to sleep, lit only by the soft blue glow of the TV. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Rob get away with this. I dropped Mia off at the public library. She had snacks, a blanket, and a stack of books about space and dinosaurs, her comfort zone. The children's librarian seemed kind and smiled at her like she was a normal kid. That mattered. I made sure Mia had my phone number and the motel address written down, just in case. Then I hit the gas and headed for Leah's house. But not before stopping at a corner store to grab a cheap burner phone. I opened the voice recorder app and tucked it into my shirt pocket. I didn't know if it would be admissible in court, but I needed proof. Real evidence. When I pulled onto Leah's street, everything looked so normal. Bikes on lawns, flags on porches, birds chirping, but inside my chest, everything was burning. I rang the doorbell. Rob answered, in a bathrobe, holding a mug of coffee. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world. Jack, right? Leah's out looking for your sister, he said sharply, like I was the problem here. I know where Mia is, I replied coldly. And she's safe. He looked at me over his coffee like I was the problem. Safe? He said, raising his eyebrows. Safe from what? We were taking great care of her until you started filling her head with garbage. I didn't waste time. She told me about your little boxing sessions. He smirked. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Oh, that? He said, like it was nothing. Just a little discipline. Kid needs structure. She was acting out, making weird noises, avoiding eye contact. Someone's got to teach her to act normal. I stared at him, stunned. He was openly justifying hitting my 10-year-old autistic sister like it was no big deal. You had no right to lay a hand on her, I said, my voice shaking. He just leaned against the doorframe, completely unfazed. Look, kid, your sister's got issues. Sometimes tough love is what they need. And right then, I heard it. The sound of tires crunching in the driveway. Leah's car pulled in fast. She got out, slammed the door so hard the windows shook, and stormed toward us. You! She shouted, red-faced. Where is Mia? I've been driving around all morning looking for her. Before I could say a word, she slapped me. Right across the face. The crack echoed across the quiet street. You're turning her against her own family. What kind of twisted game are you playing? Rob slung his arm around her like some sleazy sitcom husband. Told you he's unstable, honey. Then Leah pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking. I'm calling the police. You can't just take a child from her legal guardian. Legal guardian? I fired back. I brought her to you voluntarily. And just so you know, I filed for emergency temporary guardianship this morning. She froze. I watched her face shift. The court granted it, I said. Given everything going on with our parents, and your history. Leah's face twisted. What history? The history I outlined in my affidavit, I said. Mental instability, delusions, fabricating stories about abuse. That's when it hit me. She'd set me up. And the terrifying part? It was working. The police arrived minutes later. No sirens, but flashing lights and all. They listened to both sides. I mentioned the recording I'd made on the burner phone, but they shut that down immediately. Virginia's a two-party consent state. My recording was illegal. They gave me a choice: leave or be arrested for trespassing. As I backed away from the porch, I saw Leah standing in the doorway, smug. Rob still had his arm around her, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. That night, I got a notification. Leah had posted on Facebook a long, vague message about how some people with mental health issues can become dangerous, and how she was protecting her family from someone who had taken a child under false pretenses. She didn't say my name, but everyone in the family knew exactly who she meant. The comments were flooded with support. Stay strong, Leah. Some people are just toxic, praying for you. No one knew the truth. No one knew that the child she was supposedly protecting was the same child her husband had hit. That night, I picked Mia up from the library and took her back to the motel. I didn't tell her what had happened. I didn't want to scare her more. But that night was the worst I'd ever seen her. It started when I accidentally turned the TV up too loud. Mia covered her ears, started rocking, whimpering, and then screamed. She dropped to the floor, curled up tight, knees to her chest, shaking violently. I tried to hold her, but she pushed me away. Screaming, sobbing, I turned off the lights, the TV, everything. Just silence and her breathing, ragged and uneven. Eventually, she crawled into the closet and shut the door. I sat outside, whispering through it. You're safe, I'm not mad. I'm here. She didn't say anything that night. For 2 full days, the only word she spoke was, sorry. Over and over, like she believed she had done something wrong. She stopped eating, wouldn't make eye contact. She just rocked back and forth in that motel closet, her fingers fluttering like silent panic signals. And I was out of ideas, out of money, out of time. Then, 3 days after everything blew up, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leah. We need to talk. I didn't know what Rob was doing. He's gone. Mia can come back. I'll pay for therapy. I stared at the screen in the dark. Part of me wanted to throw the phone out the window. But another part? The part looking at Mia's tiny form curled in a closet, whispering, sorry, in the dark? That part couldn't afford pride. I agreed to meet Leah the next morning, and once again, I had to trust the woman who had already betrayed us both. For the past few days, the school librarian had been a godsend. She seemed to understand Mia's needs without needing explanations, letting her sit in the quiet reading nook, bringing her space and dinosaur books, never forcing conversation. It was the only calm Mia had known in days. Leah walked into the diner late. She looked wrecked. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, circles under her eyes, and what looked like a bruise hidden beneath a swipe of makeup on her cheekbone. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for the menu. Before I could say a word, she blurted out, "He hit me too!" I stared at her, stunned. "I didn't know he was hurting Mia," she continued, voice cracking. "I thought she was just saying those things because she missed you." Her mascara ran down her cheeks as she cried. And even though every part of me wanted to hate her, I believed her. Maybe Rob had manipulated her too. Maybe she really didn't know. "What about the guardianship papers?" I asked. "The Facebook post?" She wiped her face with a napkin, leaving dark smudges behind. "I panicked," she admitted. "I thought you were trying to take her away because you didn't trust me. I overreacted. I'll withdraw the petition." We sat in that booth for over an hour. She talked about filing for divorce, said Rob had moved in with his brother. She swore Mia would be safe, that she wanted to fix what had been broken. She asked if Mia could come by the house, just to say goodbye to her daughter Emma. The girls were close. "You can see for yourself," she added. "Make sure Rob's gone. Stay for dinner. We can talk about maybe making a plan together. Maybe you stay for a while. Help Mia adjust." It sounded so hopeful, like maybe everything would finally be okay. I let Mia go, just for the night. I told myself it was just to say goodbye. I'd pick her up after school the next day. And maybe this could work. But the next morning, everything shattered. A text from Leah lit up my screen. "Don't contact me or Mia again. She's where she belongs." I froze. My hands went cold. I jumped into my car and flew down the road. Screeching into her driveway, I banged on the door until my knuckles hurt. No answer. I called Mia's school. That's when I got the final blow. She's been officially re-enrolled, the secretary said. Under her aunt's guardianship. The paperwork was submitted last night. And it hit me. Leah must have taken the documents from my bag at the diner. I always kept Mia's forms and records with me. She had forged my signature. I didn't sleep that night. I parked my car across from the school and just waited. I missed shifts. Eventually, I lost my job. I didn't care. All that mattered was Mia. Finally, one afternoon, I saw her. Leah was picking her up. Mia walked with her head down. No flapping, no bouncing, no soft humming, just a blank, heavy silence. She glanced at the car, right at me, but her eyes were empty. Not a flicker of recognition, no smile, no wave. That's when I knew. She wasn't okay. I started digging. Rob had a record, nothing involving children, but still, DUIs, bar fights, enough to raise alarm bells. And then I came up with a plan. It wasn't exactly legal, but I was desperate. I bought a cheap stuffed bear at Walmart, carefully opened a seam in the back, and placed a tiny voice-activated recorder inside. Then I stitched it back up. Next, I went to see Mrs. Patel, Mia's former school counselor, the one who'd helped with her autism diagnosis. I told her everything, showed her before and after photos, videos of Mia being herself, happy, expressive, safe. Then I described the version I saw now, the one who looked hollow. I just need to know she's okay, I pleaded. If she is, I'll walk away, but if she's not, Mrs. Patel agreed, carefully. She called Leah and explained it as part of a new therapy initiative, something to help special needs students transition better between home and school using comforting items. Leah, maybe wanting to seem cooperative, agreed. The next morning, Mia was given the bear. She hugged it to her chest like it was a lifeline. A part of me wondered if she somehow knew I had sent it. Then came the wait. 3 long, aching days. Finally, Mrs. Patel called me in after school hours. The bear was on her desk. My hands trembled as I opened it and removed the device. What I heard made me sick. There was constant verbal cruelty. Leah calling Mia names, telling her she was broken, a burden. Rob's voice, he was still there, showed up in the evenings. Mia sobbing, begging to be left alone. And then, most chilling of all, Rob's voice on the recording was cold. "You're lucky I'm only using fists this time." Seconds later, Leah's voice, "Don't get blood on the carpet again." My stomach turned. I copied the audio immediately, made backups on 2 drives and the cloud. Then I edited the files into one clean, time-stamped clip, removing any parts where my voice might have been caught. What was left was undeniable. Clear, unfiltered evidence of abuse. Then I sent it out, anonymously, to the school board, the PTA, the principal. I included a short message. "This is happening to a child in your care. Please act before it's too late." The next day, Mrs. Patel called. Her voice was shaking. "CPS came this morning. They pulled Mia out of class." Leah showed up screaming, but they didn't let her near Mia. I was already in my car before she finished the sentence. At the CPS office, a caseworker met me in the lobby. They'd identified me as Mia's brother through school records. They had questions, but first they let me see her. I thought she'd run to me, hug me, cry maybe, but she didn't move. She sat perfectly still in a chair, hands folded in her lap. No rocking, no eye movement, just stillness. "Hey, Mia Bug," I said softly, using the nickname she used to love. "It's me, Jack." She looked at me and said in a flat voice, "Hello." That was it. The caseworker pulled me aside and explained, they believed Leah and Rob had been giving Mia sedatives. Bottles marked as herbal sleep drops were found in the house, but preliminary tests showed the liquid contained compounds that dulled memory and suppressed emotional response. They had been drugging her. That empty look on her face at school, that wasn't just trauma, it was chemical suppression. The bruises on her arms and back, the silence, the stillness, it all made sense now. The caseworker, Ms. Winters, said the evidence, the recordings, the drugs, Mia's condition, was more than enough. Leah and Rob would never get custody again, but they needed to know why I hadn't come forward sooner, why I'd trusted Leah in the first place. So I told them everything, our parents, the years I spent protecting Mia alone, how Leah had manipulated me, forged documents, played both sides. I showed them the texts, the court filing she faked. I even admitted to planting the recorder inside the bear. Ms. Winters just nodded. You did what you had to do, she said. You protected your sister, that's what matters. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. Mia stayed in a temporary foster home, and I was allowed to stay nearby. The family was kind, but Mia was silent, barely eating, barely blinking. It was like she had disappeared into herself. I kept thinking I was too late, that I hadn't saved her in time. Ms. Winters came by every few days. She had a quiet way of talking to Mia. Calm, soft, patient. Sometimes Mia would give a small nod or a single word reply. Tiny signals. But they meant everything. She's healing, Ms. Winters told me one day while Mia napped on the couch. Children are resilient. The brain has a way of protecting itself. She's still in there. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Day 9, I made Mia her favorite breakfast, Mickey Mouse pancakes with chocolate chips. I'd been cooking all her old favorites, hoping something might trigger a reaction. She looked down at the plate, frowned slightly, and said, The chocolate chips, they're touching the edges. I froze. What do you mean? I asked gently. They have to stay in the middle, she said, voice flat but firm, and I nearly cried, right there at the kitchen table. Because before everything, that was her thing. She never ate pancakes if the chocolate chips touched the edge. She'd rearrange them, make little patterns in the center. It was one of those quirks that made her Mia. I'm sorry, I said, standing to fix it. Let me make it right. As I turned to go back to the stove, I felt a soft tug on my sleeve. Mia was looking up at me, a tiny crease between her brows. Jack, she said. Where are we? And in that moment, I knew. She was coming back. Not all at once. Not fully yet. But piece by piece, she was finding her way home. In the days that followed, I saw more glimmers. She started flapping her hands when she got excited, hummed Cinderella again under her breath. She asked to read about Saturn. She requested her headphones. She started sitting closer to me on the couch, just like before. Every moment was a victory, because Mia wasn't lost. She had just been waiting for someone to fight hard enough to bring her back. Mia started showing little signs of herself again. Tiny hand flaps when something on TV made her laugh, asking for her noise-canceling headphones when the vacuum cleaner got too loud, even having a full-blown meltdown when we changed her morning routine. And you know what? I welcomed it, because it meant she was feeling again. She was coming back. While Mia was healing, the case against Leah and Rob was building fast. Ms. Winters kept me in the loop. The audio recordings had been verified by experts. The bottles of herbal drops turned out to be prescription sedatives, ones neither of them had scripts for. And most importantly, Mia began talking. At first it came in pieces, but slowly the truth surfaced. Rob used to hit her every time she stimmed. Leah forced her to hold eye contact for training that lasted hours. They made her sit completely still during meals. And if she moved or made a sound, she didn't eat. Every new detail made me want to explode. But I didn't. I focused on Mia, on giving her what they never did: stability, love, patience. I worked closely with her therapist, built daily visual schedules. I studied sensory processing issues and adjusted our environment to help her feel safe. Our lives became structured, but gentle, predictable, but warm. Then, one afternoon, the call came. Rob's been arrested, Ms. Winters told me. Child abuse charges. Possibly aggravated assault too, based on Mia's injuries. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. And Leah? I asked. She's cooperating with prosecutors, claims she was abused too, says she was scared. Ms. Winters' voice made it clear what she thought of that. Leah would likely get probation, counseling, and a permanent restraining order, banned from ever contacting Mia again. Not perfect justice, but real justice. Now we had to figure out the next chapter. Where would Mia live long term? I was 20. No job. No stable housing. Our parents? Not even an option. Foster care seemed inevitable, and that idea made me sick. Mia didn't need strangers. She needed me. That's when Mrs. Patel stepped in. Again. What if you applied for guardianship, she suggested. You've been her real caregiver for years. I shook my head. They're not going to hand a child over to a broke, unemployed 20-year-old. Not as you are now, she said. But what if you had a job, a home, a plan? That conversation turned into something bigger. Her husband owned a small landscaping company. He needed office help. The pay wasn't great, but it was reliable. and they had a tiny apartment above their garage. A mother-in-law suite they offered to rent to me at a discount. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With their help, I pulled together a guardianship application. Teachers who had seen me pick Mia up after school wrote letters. Neighbors vouched for me. Even my old manager talked about the overtime I worked to pay for Mia's therapy. The hearing was set for early May. I wore the only nice clothes I had, khakis and a shirt from a high school presentation. Mia sat beside me in a dress she picked out herself. It was purple, with dinosaurs. She was stimming more than usual, tapping her fingers nervously, but she was trying to stay calm. The judge was an older woman with silver hair and calm eyes. She reviewed the file carefully, asked about Mia's schooling, therapy, care plans. I answered honestly. I didn't have a lot, but I had a job. I had a home. I had her. "And what about your own future?" the judge asked, looking up over her glasses. The judge peered over her glasses at me. "Most people your age aren't ready to be full-time parents," she said gently. I looked over at Mia, who was now rocking slightly in her chair, staring at the carpet's pattern like it held the answer to everything. "With all due respect, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "I've been taking care of my sister since I was 14. If I need to take online classes later, I will. If I need to build a career around her needs, I'll do it. But what I can't do is let her down." The judge nodded and made a note in the file. Then she turned to Mia. "And what about you, young lady? Where do you want to live?" Mia looked up, startled. She glanced at me, then back at the judge. "With Jack," she whispered. "He knows about the chocolate chips." The judge blinked in confusion, but I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing, because that was Mia. In her world, that was love. That I knew how she liked her pancakes, with the chocolate chips exactly in the center, was everything. To my surprise, the judge smiled too. "Well," she said, closing the file, "that seems like a very important qualification." Then, removing her glasses, she said the words I hadn't dared hope for. "I'm granting temporary guardianship for 6 months. Monthly check-ins from CPS. If all goes well, we'll revisit permanent custody at that time." Just like that, it was official. Mia was mine. No more bouncing between placements. No more fear of being taken away. We were a family now. Small, messy, and unconventional, but a family. The next few months were tough, but good. I started my job answering phones and scheduling landscaping jobs. With Mrs. Patel's help, I got Mia enrolled in a school that actually understood autism. We moved into the tiny apartment above the garage, which Mia proudly called a treehouse with plumbing. We built routines together. Saturdays were for chocolate chip pancakes, always centered. Sundays, library trips. Tuesdays and Thursdays, therapy. Every night, quiet time and stories. I learned how to spot the signs of a meltdown, how to make her environment safe and calming. Mia learned that stimming was okay, that she didn't have to pretend to be someone she wasn't, that nobody would punish her for being her. There were setbacks, of course. Nights filled with nightmares about Rob. Days where she refused to leave the house, terrified that Leah might be waiting. But we worked through them. Together. 6 months later, we returned to court. This time, I had proof. Pay stubs, teacher reports, therapist notes saying Mia was thriving. The judge didn't hesitate. Permanent guardianship, granted. As for Rob and Leah, justice happened quietly in the background. Rob took a deal. 8 years for child abuse and assault. Leah got probation, mandatory counseling, and a lifetime ban on contact with Mia. Her daughter Emma went to live with Leah's parents. They seemed kind. I thought about staying in touch, for Mia's sake. But her therapist advised waiting. Maybe one day, when the memories weren't so fresh. Our parents never reached out. I heard through distant relatives they'd moved to a commune out west. It was probably for the best. About a year after it all, I built Mia a small garden in the backyard. Just a few raised beds for sunflowers and cherry tomatoes. She loved organizing the plants into neat little patterns that only made sense to her. It became her safe space, her quiet place to grow. One evening, I brought her a snack while she sat painting watercolors at her little table in the garden. The sunset bathed everything in gold. She had her headphones on, focused on swirling colors and soft music. I placed a plate of apple slices next to her, perfectly spaced in a circle, not touching. Just how she liked it. I turned to leave, not wanting to interrupt when I felt her hand wrap around mine. "Jack," she said, lifting one side of her headphones. "Yeah, Mia bug?" I'm happy here. 3 words. Simple, soft, but they hit harder than anything I've ever heard. After everything, the fear, the fighting, the dark nights, I finally knew. She was safe. She was home, and she was happy. I squeezed her hand gently. Me too, kid, I said. Me too. She went back to painting, humming the Cinderella soundtrack under her breath, just like old times.